All right, so welcome aboard. We're a smaller group today, but we are a mighty group. I know that there are lots of things that were happening today, especially track meets. And so people had emailed me already saying that they wouldn't be here, but they're going to be watching the recording, and that's absolutely fine. That's why we're doing this. So today's session is really to unpack the sort of the foundational documents that we have prepared for you that we will use when we get together again in planning. So that's the pieces that I will be sharing with you in the chat box today. So if you're at your own computer, you're going to want to grab them as I put them in the chat box and then save them to your computer. And I'll talk to you a little bit about sort of what to print out and where you want to print it and those pieces there. I'm not going to play the video today just in time, but the video that I provided for you here along with our land acknowledgement talks about the acknowledgement from an Indigenous perspective and how they acknowledge the land that they are on. It's a very short video, but it's an excellent one. So I do encourage you to listen to that one as well. So in the spirit of reconciliation, we want to acknowledge that this gathering is taking place on traditional lands across the province of Alberta, home to many diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We acknowledge that this land is a traditional meeting ground, giving voice to its original peoples and the story of creation of this country in a way that history has forgotten. Okay, got a delay happening here. So I'm going to skip the discussion because I think we've had a really good discussion already, and I really appreciate that. That's been wonderful. Just want to point out for those who might be really new to this sort of setup and what we've been doing all the way through, we've had these same types of sessions for K-3. We started them last year already. And when we had this diagram, it was sort of K1, 2, 3. But now that we're unpacking all of the grades, 4, 5, 6 included, the model changes just a little bit. And I do think it's worth talking and pointing out that the grade 4s, although they're in Division 2, they don't really live in Division 2 in the same way that they have in the past, that they're solely there. You know, 4 goes directly to 5, which it still will. 5 goes directly to 6. The 4s live in a bit of a land of K-3 and 4 to 6. They are the finishers of a number of the organizing ideas from grade 3, or that live in the K-3 world. And they are the kind of the keepers of the big rocks, especially those unit fractions, and really unpack those in depth and make sure the kids are solid in it, so that when they come here to grade 5 and 6 and we start doing things like improper fractions, kids can count by improper, or they can count by unit fractions. They are the keepers of making sure that that transition is really strong and smooth. So that's why I placed them in the middle, because they are in a little bit of a different world right now. Grade 5 and 6s are very strongly linked to junior high, because there's been significant downloads from the junior high levels into the grade 5s and 6s, more into the 6 from the junior high directly, although some of the things we'll talk about today in grade 5 are in fact from grade 9. But the grade 5s have got a lot of materials from the grade 6. So there's that sort of that slide down. And so if you've taught 6 before, you kind of know what was there. So some of those will now be taught in grade 5. So again, if you had a split class, like a 5-6, you're going to know that both groups won't know that. So I have a common starting point for some of those things that I'm going to begin with the students. Okay, so we're going to just look very quickly at the architecture to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And Vicki, I apologize because I know that you know this, but I just want to make sure that everybody that's watching the video is also really in the know with the terminology. So organizing idea has replaced our topics of strands. We no longer have strands in math. We don't have topics in science. We don't have GLOs and E in English language arts and so on. Everybody is using an organizing idea. The guiding question is a question that sits right below the organizing idea, and it was designed for the teacher. So we'll talk that one through in just a few minutes. The learner outcome is in fact what we're used to seeing. It's what the student has to be able to demonstrate to us so that we can say, yes, they have met this learner outcome. We know that they know what they're doing. Check, meeting, exceeding, whatever terminology you use. The learner outcomes have specific pieces of information that need to be taught that relate to them. And those are found in the knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures, often called the cusps. If you use the first letters of the words KUSP, then we're talking about what are those rocks that live in the work that the students have to do to meet that learner outcome. Literacy, numeracy, and competencies are still from the 2013 ministerial order. And remember that ministerial orders tell us what we must do. That's not a negotiable. You can't say, I'll do this piece, but I've never done that. I'm not going to do that. Those direct what we do as teachers. And these were first introduced in 2013, and they have been carried over by this current minister into our current curriculum. So the expectation at 2013 and still exists is that every teacher, every grade, every year, every subject will talk about the numeracy, literacy, and meet all 8 competencies. The intent was that by 2030, the student who entered in 2013 and graduates in 2030 would be fully versed in the competencies, could describe themselves in competencies, knows their strengths and weaknesses, because the belief was that by 2030, all the interviews, jobs, positions that were out there would be competency-based. Well, we don't need to wait till 2030. We've been there for about 5 years already. So students really do need to know what those are, how they impact their daily living, how they learn through those competencies, and what are their strengths and weaknesses in each of those areas. So the very first document that we want to look at are the numbered outcomes document. And that numbered outcomes document comes directly from our curriculum document, the one if you go to New Learn Alberta and you get the large printable one, which has kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2 on the front pages, and then later it goes to 3, 4, and then 5, 6. That document is what we call our numbered outcomes document because we actually put numbers onto the outcomes to make it easier for reference. That particular design, that large document that you see, starts from the very general at the top, very broad, big concept, big ideas at the very top. And then it starts to work its way down in my grade to the specifics that my students have to learn. So if you think of it as an upside down triangle with the broad base at the top, which spans a whole bunch of grades, and whatever sits in there are sort of the big ideas, and how I unpack that great big idea is specific to me by the learner outcome, by the cusps, and it starts to wheedle it down so I see how I'm going to unpack that big rock that sits up there for my students. So when we look at that particular document, the organizing idea is always the darkest of the colors. So whenever you see 3 colors on a sheet, you know that you're into a new organizing idea. And which organizing idea? It'll be the very first word that comes right behind it. In this case, it says number. And then it has a statement. Quantity is measured with numbers that enable counting, labeling, comparing, and operating. This is a general statement, which you see the color goes all the way across. And if you could see it, it goes all the way to grade 6. One sentence, one organizing idea that spans 7 grades, because kindergarten is included. This is where I'll find the big rocks, the big ideas, the overarching concepts, and it's going to be important for us to find those. The guiding question is a question that's specific to each grade, and it was intended for the teacher to read and ponder about how you would answer that question should help to plan, should help to inform what my lesson unit might look like, what strategies I might start thinking about I'm going to need. So it was for the teacher. It wasn't meant to be turned into an I can statement for the students and put on the board. The learner outcome is exactly that. It's what we're used to seeing. I should just keep going here. Oh, sorry, I skipped a slide here. I'll just go back to this one. These are the organizing ideas that we have right now in the math program. And you'll see that some of them go all across the grades, right? It starts in kindergarten, goes all the way to grade 6, and we don't know yet what 7 to 9 looks like. But you also see that some of them don't start until later. For example, algebra does not start until grade 3. We see that coordinate geometry doesn't start until grade 5. We also see that time ends at the end of grade 4. So you as grade 5 teachers should know what is it that they talked about in time, because in some of those, it'll be angles, it'll be measures, it'll be rotations. All of that kind of thing has already happened in a perfect world. If they arrived at your door having done the K1, 2, 3, 4 new curriculum, they would know that. Okay, so yes, there's going to have to be some bridging there because they won't know that because they didn't do that in the past year. But there are things that we can pick up. So just so that you get a sense of how to read this particular document. So the guiding question we talked about, let's look at the learner outcome. The learner outcome is that it's familiar to us. It's also what you have to report on. So there was some discussion earlier in the beginning of the year with the K-3 starting that there would be a provincial report card. When we asked the question, the response was, well, you actually already have a provincial report card. And we said, you want to explain that to us? And they're quite right, because if it is the learner outcome that I'm reporting on, if that's what should be seen in the report card, in theory, the province would have a provincial report card because everybody would have the same. Now, that doesn't mean that each individual board can't make some variations. Some of them have put sub-bullets under there, some of them changed around. That's entirely up to your board to decide, and you need to ask them how they're planning to roll out the reporting. But what becomes important is if this is the learner outcome, and this is what I have to teach to the students, what I have to teach within that learner outcome is described in those 3 columns below each of my grades learner outcomes. The first one is the knowledge. And the knowledge is really the facts. It's the part you can't get away from. You have to teach facts. You have to somehow get me the foundational understanding. You can't ask me to apply something if I don't even know what the basics are yet. So in a lot of cases, the knowledge will have definitions in it. It'll have a description of what they're supposed to have. It'll have bullets, say, to include the following. So it's very, very specific. I need to teach that. But we run the risk too of when you read some of these, it makes it really easy to want to turn it to a checklist and say, yeah, did that one, yeah, did all those, check, done. Your check done as in teaching the surface level factual stuff. We're not even scratching the surface of being done as far as transferring the knowledge so that the students have to actually integrate it and use it. Then we know that they understand and we understand what they're doing with it. So that's the important piece is the knowledge. I need to get that through to the students, but I also need to go beyond that. I can't live in the world of just knowledge. The understanding is actually the most important of the 3 columns. It combines the knowledge, skills, and procedures. So really it's the understanding that when I'm saying, yeah, they got this, they've got this cusp, I'm saying they have met this statement. And that's really important for us to sort of differentiate. The skills and procedures aren't new to us either. We've always had skills. We've always had processes. We called them in the old curriculum. So same thing happens here. What are the processes that students have to be able to demonstrate to us? What might be a little bit different is that the verbs that you see in here, those skills, have to be taught to the students and have to be assessed. So we need to make sure that students understand what it means to recognize. Or if I use the word represent on a test, you don't have 21 hands that come up and every one of them's asking you, what does that mean? What am I supposed to do with represent? They would know that. So this is part of the teaching piece that we have to integrate as we get our units together. And we'll talk about those at a later date, not right now. So the numbered outcomes, the reason we call it numbered outcomes is we took this document here, and as we were preparing the ones that I'm going to share with you today, we ran into some snags. And the biggest one was we couldn't figure out where all of us were on what page. There was a team of 25 of us working on this. We were forever saying count down 7 pages, count down 3 rows. There was no fast reference, and that kind of stuff drives me crazy. So I went through and I numbered. I'll own it. I went through and I numbered them all. And because I was doing K-3, we just kept right on going and did 4, 5, 6 at the same time. And since then, people have actually liked it because it's easy for them to reference. It's easy for them to put into their planning book. I'm doing 6N1 or I'm doing 5N1.2, whatever. So that was the only reason we did this. Do you have to use the numbered outcomes? No, you don't. You can just go and download the one from Alberta Ed and it doesn't have numbers on it. But we are going to use this as references because it's easier for us to identify components that we're going to work on as we kind of spiral through the curriculum. So how I read the numbers that are in front, and the process is the same whether you teach kindergarten or grade 6. The very first item will be a number, or in kindergarten, it'll be a K. In this case, the number 5 says this is a grade 5 outcome, grade 5 grade. The letter that's behind it stands for number. So that's the organizing idea that I'm working in. So N for number, there's other ones, and I'll show you where those are. Behind that is what outcome is this in this document? Remember when we numbered them, I did not change anything. This is a straight download from Alberta Ed's website. So this was the very first outcome that showed up in grade 5. It says students analyze patterns in place value. We didn't change the order. So if that's the first outcome, it got number 1. If there's another one that's number 2, number 3, number 4, whatever, however many there are in number, they each get their own numbered value. So each learner outcome gets its own number. However, some of the learner outcomes, this one is not one of them, have more than one row of cusps below them. In some cases, like in grade 4, they have in the second outcome 6, I think it is, rows of cusps. The learner outcome does not change its wording. What will change is what is in the knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures. So each row of cusps can change if there's multiple rows, but the wording of the learner outcome does not change. It's one learner outcome, that's what I'm reporting on. So here you see in grade 6, 6N 1.1. So this is the first numbered outcome in grade 6. Students investigate magnitude with positive and negative numbers. But because it has a 0.1 behind it, this is the first row of cusps that belongs to that particular learner outcome. If I go to the next page, I'll see the same learner outcome with another row of cusps. So whole new knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. And it's done that way for every one of the learner outcomes. We did that for language arts. We did that for math. We did that for science. We've done that for phys ed and wellness. And it's been actually quite well received. I will say that right now. Here's the example of the 6N2. So 1.2, here's the second row of cusps for the same learner outcome. Student investigate magnitude, positive and negative numbers. Now, this is the one thing that I did do that was different, so that you don't have to keep flipping back to the beginning and finding out what the wording of the learner outcome was. I simply inserted the learner outcome right above the row of cusps. So the wording's the same, showing you it's the second one, showing you here's the third one. All I did was just cut and paste it so that you don't have to keep flipping back to the top to figure out what it was. You'll notice on this side, there's nothing. There was no additional rows in grade 5. It just said 5N1, no decimal. So this is the only row of cusps that goes with that learner outcome. So until all of this one is finished in grade 6, these just stay blank on that side. So this is how this document was put together. I'm going to grab it right now. I'm going to throw it into the chat box. As soon as it loads up here, there we go. And I'll ask you to grab it. This is the most recent version, I can tell you. So just grab it from the chat box, make sure that it opens. That's the other thing. And then just save that to your computer. And what I would suggest you do, if you're kind of keeping a sort of a bit of a note, these are best printed on 11 by 17 in color. So the big, large ledger size paper. I would do it back to back so that you can just flip it up and just keep reading down, flip it up, keep reading down. So I would print it on large, I would print it in color, and I would also print it so that I have a copy on my desk that I can write on as the year goes on. There'll be notes that you're going to want to keep as you go through sort of the spiraling pieces, just to remind yourself. So it's nice if you have one that can just be your working copy. That would be the best way. Okay, any questions about how to read the numbered outcomes document? Okay, let me keep going then, because I'm going to just be cognizant of time here. So there are some things in that document, though, that we need to be aware of. And one of them is the language that you're going to encounter in some of those knowledge pieces, usually knowledge, sometimes skills and procedures. If you come across the word including will have something that comes behind it. So here you see subtraction can be applied in various contexts, including. Whatever comes below or behind the word including must be included in your lesson plan somewhere, not all the same day, but everything that's listed there is expected to be taught to the students. You don't get to kind of say, I do the first two, but I've never done the last one, I'm not doing it. So we want to make sure that all of those are included. But what it doesn't say is that if I have another best practice that I have been using all these years and it's worked so well with the kids and it's not one of the ones listed, absolutely add it in there. You're not throwing away any best practices. You're not throwing away something that you've been using all along and has worked well with your style of teaching and with the kids. You absolutely want to keep those. So you can always add in. You just can't delete if it has a list underneath including. As opposed to if the word is such as, or you could even make a note of it, for example. In science, for example, we saw lots more for examples coming up. Treat them just like a such as. The such as will have bullets behind it as well. But those bullets are just examples that you could use if you want to. You could use them all. You could use one, you could use two, you can use none. Because you think you have better ones, then use yours. That's fine. You have full choice over what you use in a such as statement, as long as you're meeting the outcome, right? That's the only thing that we have to make sure. And then the last piece, we don't see very much of this in grade 5 and 6, mostly in the previous grades, but should you come across a word that is in brackets, in parentheses, the intent of that word was that it might be too difficult for the students to handle, and therefore it was for the teacher and parent only. In your cases, and I can't think of any right off the top of my head for grade 5, there aren't really any words that we wouldn't show the grade 5s. The intent for the younger grades is that you might show them the word translation, you might teach them the word translation, but you might use the word slide 90% of the time, as long as they kind of know what a translation is. So that was the intent of those that were in the brackets. And then let's have a quick look at the verb column. The verbs typically, sometimes they're up in the learner outcome. Sometimes they even live up in the organizing idea, but the majority of the time they live in skills and procedures. And those verbs have some pretty definite meanings in them. But just because you might be able to define one of those verbs, you have to also look at the context that it's given in, because sometimes that word could actually imply another verb is really what it's saying. So for example, children interpret compositions of quantities within 10. The way they've used interpret here means I could identify quantities of 10. I could make quantities to 10. I could recognize, like subitize values to 10. So there's a lot of ways that this interpret could be used with other verbs and still meet interpret. So even when we teach the science right now, we're saying sometimes there's a verb that's sitting there, but it's the intent of the verb that they're trying to get across here. You may select another verb that actually models what it is that they're trying to do. Here's another one. Students interpret 2 and 3D dimensions, which means I could identify, maybe I can model it, I could sort it, compose, decompose, investigate. There's a lot of possibilities that would meet this particular learner outcome and the intent of interpret. So again, you're not limited. There are lots of verbs. And as we start unpacking the curriculum, I might even go around and say in each of the months, let's focus on these 6. You've got 12 that showed up, but they're all really kind of condensing down to these 6. So rather than us kind of going off and doing 12 generally, why don't we do 6 really well? We can always pick up the other ones in the following year. So the intent will be to try and get some of those skills and procedures down to a bit of a model as well. Okay, so to find the concepts, I'm going to run through this very quickly, but I want to make sure that regardless of whether you're the only teacher that teaches grade 5 or grade 6 in your school, or you have a grade partner, we want to make sure that you are finding those big rock concepts as anybody else would down south, up north, and you would be assessing the same things. Even though you're not in the same building, we would know that across the province, everybody's kind of got the same big rocks. They found them. So it's really important that we know how to find them. We also have to be able to identify them, but we also want to make sure that we are doing the concept and not just a bunch of skills stuff that's happening in the knowledge section, right? Skills and procedures and knowledge. I don't want to just do that checklist approach. So if all I do are those facts, knowledge and skills, but I don't actually take the students beyond that, they're great at defining, they can fill in the blank, they can tell me a formula because they've memorized it, but that doesn't know that they get to understanding. But if that's where I live, I'm living in what's called a 2D model. It's very surface level teaching. And when they get to a PAD exam, they get to a diploma exam where multiple concepts are put into a question, they tank. And it's not because they don't know the material. They know the material. They've just never been exposed to putting them together and connecting them. And a high stakes exam isn't the time for me to have to be the first time seeing a connection question. So that's the piece that we have to do, those surface levels, but we just don't stop there. That should only be a part of our lesson in a day. In any given day, I'm going to do this, but before they leave my class, I'm going to get them to a concept level. I want to ask them some questions that bring me to a higher level. So that's our goal. Our goal is that we want to live in the world of concepts. We want to take what the big rock is and take that knowledge and move them forward. 2D is pretty shallow. It's just fact, right? It's memorization. And we all know that kids can memorize, but that doesn't mean they understand. Typically, students who are excellent memorizers and who do phenomenal in math and no one's picked up that they're memorizing will start to tank towards the latter part of grade 6, if not by the beginning of grade 7, because research shows that the brain of a child who has been masterful at memorizing reaches a point of, my brain is full. I don't want any more short-term memorizational kind of stuff. I can't handle anymore. And then we start to see these kids start dropping. And then you get parents saying, I don't get it. They've been getting 95 all the time. And now all of a sudden they're not. What's the problem here? The problem is that they memorized. They didn't actually learn. And that is a big difference. So as we start this new curriculum, we can infuse some questioning that we could use just to double check that they're not just memorizing, that in fact, they're actually giving us the explanation that we're looking for. And that's where our goal is, to get them to that deeper level. We want something that's not just surface facts memorization. They don't transfer. Kids that memorize don't transfer. And that's the problem that we run into, right? Is they don't see how I'm going to apply that. And so I need to make sure that when I give them factual information, I also give them the opportunity to use it outside of examples that I've used. If an example that you've used on the board has a certain pattern to it, and that's reflected in the test questions that you give, I guarantee you that your memorizers will do exceptionally well, because they're memorizing the format of the example, not necessarily applying the understanding. So when I give them a question to check for understanding, it should be quite different from what I've seen as modeled examples that I've been working on. So what is a concept? Okay, I'm not going to show this video, but if you have never seen this before, it's not specific to math only. It's saying, what is the difference between just rote, stand up and teach and a concept-based lesson? So if it's new to you, this is a quick video. It's only 4 minutes long. Good to watch. So concepts are generally nouns. If you've never found concepts before, look for a noun. Look for a word that's quite open, quite vague, timeless, such as if you go to your learner outcome on that very first page for grade 5, it had the word quantity in it. The organizing idea. The organizing idea, quantity, that's a big word. Quantity of what? Quantity of people, quantity of apples, capacity, volume, like what kind of quantity? So that is a noun. It is a concept. How I unpack concept of quantity will be specific to what my learner outcome says I need to do with my students. It's universal. Go to any place in the world. You might not speak their language, but they'll have a word that means quantity. It's not specific to North America. It's pretty abstract, open, like I said, and transferable. I can take quantity and apply it to a whole bunch of different contexts, and it still will work, right? I just need to understand the context of how I'm going to unpack that quantity and do something with it. A chair is a concept. So if I go into Leon's, and they always meet you right at the door and say, can I help you? And I say, I'd like to buy a chair. A chair is my broad concept. Each of the different kinds of chairs that I'm looking for are like your different grades. So the different grades unpack a different kind of chair. They're going to make a different chair. So I say, I'm looking for like a bar stool. So he sends me off in that direction. So I've already taken out a whole bunch of stuff in the store that I don't need to go and look at. I'm going to just zero in on the location I need to go to find my bar stool. So a concept should start very general, and it can get more specific as a topic as I start unpacking my learner outcome. Here are some examples. Characters for English language arts, for example. Character is a big, broad term, but here are different kinds of characters that could be studied at different grade levels. Same thing with geography. There's all different words for geography that can be very specific that I'm going to look at. Or math. Math is a concept, but it's pretty big. I mean, math what? Like what exactly in math am I looking at? Well, I could look at any one of these. I could look at any organizing idea. I could look at anything. So as I start to break that concept down, that's where it becomes specific. So the concept generally is the really open-ended kind of thing. It's like having a file folder. If I labeled one of these assessment, one of these number, one of these geometry, those are broad. It's what I put into the folders that have specific pages on it that make it much more concrete. So that's the kind of the analogy that I want you to think about. So we will take just a few minutes to do this one. If you can find, if you're scrolling through even on your screen, you can just listen to my voice, but just go to your numbered outcomes document and find 5N1. And if you're doing it on screen right now, because it's a PDF, you probably can't highlight it. So maybe just jot it down on a piece of paper. What I'd like you to do is start at the top and find what are the concepts that you see. And we won't get through it all, but just go through and list as many as you can. You are going to see the same words come up over and over, and that's a good thing. So let's do this, the opening line together. So the organizing idea for number. Quantity is measured with numbers that enable counting, labeling, comparing, and operating. So quantity, that's a concept, that's a noun. I'm going to go with numbers because that's a noun, although plural. If these didn't have ing on them, I would include those because count, label, compare, operate would be nouns. But right now, they're action verbs, so we'll just leave them. So I'd like you to go through guiding question, learner outcome. Just quickly run through, even if it's just knowledge. Jot down what you think are the concepts that live in that page. And for those of you that are watching this as a video after, you might want to pause the video at this point and then come back to it when you've had enough time to just really go through all three columns. All right, so I know it's a short period of time, but I'm going to just show you the concepts that I've already highlighted within each one of those statements. So it starts to see same things over and over and over again. Now, could I have just said, I'm going to do number and not decimal number? Because decimal number is actually already a topic. But for now, I'm going to just highlight it so that we're starting to look at what kind of number we're going to be talking about in grade 5. So I see number, decimal places, 0, place, decimal number, value, number, infinitely, decimal number, numbers. I'm starting to hear a pattern here over and over and over again, same kinds of things. Numbers, I need to know place values, I need to know decimals. Numbers again, decimal numbers, thousands, words, numbers. So do they, if I stand up and call out a word, the number, can they write it down, right? Can they write the numerals down? Do they identify the numerals? Decimal numbers, again. So you're seeing a pattern. And that's the kind of thing that should happen when you're looking for your concepts, because you're seeing, here's my focus in this cusp. It's kind of standing out in my face pretty obviously. Your next document that we have is your curriculum comparison document. So what was it that I taught in this current grade 5 program? and what is it that I'm going to teach in the new curriculum. So they sit side by side so you can see a comparison. So here is where you'll find those acronyms. Remember I said N for number. Here's where you'll find what letters stand for what organizing idea. So number, P for patterns, M for measurement, G for geometry, ST for statistics, and CG for coordinate geometry. And actually I see right here, A is missing for algebra. But those start to become very familiar to you as you go through them. It's not gonna throw you. But what you will see too is that they have a color coding to them. And we color coded them because of the third document that we're going to share with you. So it makes it easy for you to see what's my big thing that I'm going to be doing for the next month or 2 months. And we just color coded them to help teachers see that right up front and what kinds of things are fitting together. So how you read the curriculum comparison document, down the left-hand side is your old number strand, or you'll see patterns and relations, or all those old strands that we had. They're down the left-hand side. We went through and we picked out whatever outcomes, not necessarily in order, fit to, and we actually used the understanding to match to the current old outcomes. The wording of the understanding is very similar to what we're used to seeing here. So we actually matched the understanding to any of the outcomes, could be more than one, sometimes just one, that we found was a good pairing. Although the wording might be different, if the intent was the same, we didn't make any changes or make any highlights. We just said the intent of all of those is the same as this learner outcome. So in this case, outcome 1, 2, and 11 fit your second number outcome. And that is listed right in here. Remember that number is a pinkish red color. And so every time we see a number outcome, there's going to see that color. If you see something highlighted in yellow, that's what's new. So although this is very similar to what we've always done before, what we didn't do before is have the implication that money was part of it. So anything that's highlighted in yellow means it's significantly new. So here you see 4, 5, and 6, and those fit to this learner outcome, 5 and 4, with a few additions already put into the outcome. So there were some additions already. Some of what we did was there, but there's some new pieces that go along with it. Again, highlighted in yellow for you. You'll see that outcome number 7 has nothing. So either outcome number 7 was dropped completely, or it was moved to another grade. Likely it would have gone down. We haven't seen anything move up. So if it's still alive, then it would be alive in grade 4, maybe in grade 3. So that's how you read this document. You'll see as you get starting going further in, there's lots of yellow, and I don't want you to get upset about it. Don't freak about it. We will get to those. We have time to go through those. We will revisit as our spiraling through. We keep coming back to it. So we will build on those. So I don't want anyone to panic. So let me grab the link for this and put it in the chat box. And again, I would run this one off on ledger size paper. And the reason I say that is because this is also one that the teachers did a lot of writing in and just making notes. So just having a rough copy for you to work with would be helpful. So again, it's in the chat box if you want to grab it. Now, if we had more time, normally what we would do is have you sitting with other teachers and just working your way through it and just read through, but I'm going to leave that to you to have a look at. So you're looking down the left side is old, right 3 columns is new. And how do those fit? Or do they? Like there may not be any fits, right? It might be completely new. Your last document is your sample year at a glance. And this is a sample. It's not saying it's the only way that it could be done. But given that we had to bridge, and given that we knew some students were going to arrive at your doorstep not having the background knowledge, we needed to find a way that we could highlight where might I start as a grade 5 teacher to start picking up the pieces that I need to work on without reteaching all of grade 4, because you're not going to do that. So what do I need to pick up? Where could I start? And how could I meld some of those outcomes together from all the different organizing ideas, so that as I'm getting to know the kids in September, I'm not just getting to know them and reviewing, I'm getting to know them, I'm reviewing with intent, by spiraling through my outcomes in grade 5 or grade 5, 6, while I learn about what they know and what they don't know. So this is a sample. It is not meant that you have to use this. It could be your year plan. When we meet in subsequent sessions, I will be unpacking 2 months at a time. I will use this. If you decide you want to go in a different order, totally fine, totally your call. You might just want to use this document then as what are some ideas that I could use for bridging depending on where you're starting, right? So just using it from that perspective. I've given you the sample interactive one here, and I'll explain that one to you in just a second. At the beginning of the document is the introduction. So our current curriculum has about 5 or 6 pages, maybe a little bit more, of front matter where we talk about the processes. They give you the grid, shows you kind of how things grow in the strands throughout the grades. So that was replaced with this introduction here. It's about a page and a half long. And it's the same whether you teach kindergarten or whether you teach grade 6. So if you've never had a chance to read it through, when you download this document, I would encourage you to take just 2 minutes to go through it and just see how basically the same procedures and processes are expected, just how it's been worded and all the contents that are in there. Okay, so I didn't give you the interactive one, sorry. I gave you the regular one. So I'll explain the interactive one in just a second. So here's what our year at a glance looks like. And we've used a template that Edmonton Public had created when we went on COVID and everybody was teaching from home. They had shared out those modules so graciously for the province to use. And in the sharing, they often would give you sort of a week at a glance, and they kept a running total of the things that you did in each of the months. And that was so easy for teachers to pick up and just grab. And so I actually used the same template to create this year at a glance for each grade. So whether you teach kindergarten to grade 6, each one of you has your own year at a glance. And it's just that. It's a year at a glance where you can use to unpack to get to where I need to get in my grade. So you'll see September, October, November, we kind of kept reporting periods together. But when we get together next week, it'll only be for the 2 months. We're only doing 2 months, small baby steps, chunking at a time. What's manageable? What do I need to know about the kids? Where am I going to go with this? How fast can I go? How slow do I need to go? So when I look at these, you're going to see a couple of things, and this would be worth you noting down someplace. You see 5 and 1, so there's the same numbering that we saw from our numbered outcomes document. This is your learner outcome as in that document. Students analyze patterns and place value. The bullet below that is the understanding. So all the bullets that appear in this document are the understandings that go with that learner outcome. We still will need the knowledge and skills and procedures to dig down specifically. But right now, we only put the understandings into this document because remember, this is the important piece, and it kind of helps me to say, yeah, once I drill down into the skills and the procedures and the knowledge pieces, and I've got those, I start to blend them together. This is really what I'm trying to meet, is that bullet that's there. What you see in the yellow is the bridging. So it says, analyze patterns and place value. Place value symmetry extends infinitely to the left and right of the ones place. So it's saying symmetry of the ones, there's tens and tenths. Well, we're sure not starting there in September, for sure not. We don't even want to go into the word decimals, tenths, and hundreds, not in September and not even in October yet. We kind of want to just know, what do they know? Do they even know money? If they don't know money, then let's do money, dollars and cents, because that's my tenths and hundreds right there. But just do the money. Don't say tenths and hundreds, just do dollars and cents, because that is getting to where we're going to go. I need the dollars and cents to do the budgeting later. So it's a win-win for me. Money is real. I can say that 150,000 times, and I'll probably say it another 150,000. Money's real. Kids like to handle money. They like to learn about money. But money is also a great manipulative for us. It's a great tool to use to teach so many of your outcomes. So when we're going through this particular piece here, what we're actually saying is introduce basic money skills. First of all, find out if your grade 5, 6s know money. And beyond just the memorization of what the coins are, that's like 1/64 of what they need to know. They need to know that, but that's hardly pushing the dust off the road. So we want to use the money to add numbers. We want to use the money to show me $1.26, which later becomes 1.26, which later becomes 1 and 26 hundredths. That's down the road, but let's get the money down first. So I can use that. I'm going to work on denominators of 10 and 100, not as numerator and denominator, as 1 out of 10, as 1 out of 100, out of 1 out of 10 dimes, out of 1 out of 100 dimes. I don't care about the fraction terminology. They don't need that right now. I need them to know money. I need them to know unit fractions. They don't need to know it's called a unit fraction. They just need to know that it's 1 out of 10 dimes when I put 10 dimes on a number line. This is how we're going to integrate all of these outcomes and put them together, but we just revisit. It comes in the questioning that we throw out to students. And as you listen to them say things, you're going to get better at just throwing out a question right away because you heard them say something. So I'm going to just check to see whether they know that. Do they really understand that? What about this? Okay, we just throw that out just to see where we're going. So we're going to blend all of these three outcomes to start with. You are not going to knock off 5N1 in September. You'll see it's over here. You'll see it's over here. You're not finishing it fast. You're going to do baby steps to get to it. We will get it finished. Don't worry, it will be done. Okay, 5N2, same thing. We're going to do the same thing. Initially, just start with whole numbers. Do they have a mastery of 100? If they've got a mastery of 100, try 200. If 200 works, try 500. But there's no rush. This isn't a first day I'm going to do 100, second day I'm going to do 200. If they don't have 100 at the end of the week, you're not going anywhere. Just keep working at it. Can they add to 100? Can they do place values in 100 conversations with money, not just columns, just money? Can they give me math facts to 100? Do they know that from grade 3, right? So all of those pieces for 100 mastery will build in here. The teachers in the pilot groups had also said, if there's things that we would do all year, just put it in green and just put it at the bottom. So that's what they said. In a perfect world, the grade 3s will have mastered 10 by 10. The grade 4s mastered 12 by 12. So grade 5, 6 teachers, hey, they're going to know all their math facts from now on. You're never going to have to teach them again. We know that's not true, but right now they're not all going to know 12 by 12. So they may not all know 10 by 10. So you need to go back and make sure that they know their math facts. I need that for the multiplication that's going to come, right? All of those pieces. You'll see that the same thing's happening here. We're talking about hundreds in a context, as in pennies, not hundredths as in a decimal value behind the number. This is a decimal, just in language, not in putting it down in terms of labeling it as a tenths position, hundredths position. We want the kids to tell us that when they do the money. These are the dimes. These are the pennies. So that they start to figure out 100 pennies I need to make a loonie. 100 pennies will give me a whole flat that's finished and I trade it in for a loonie. 10 pennies I can trade for a dime to a tenths position. There's where we're going to go with this, but there's no rush to get there. And you're going to do all kinds of things as it comes up with them. So let's focus on September also talks about geometry. So we would also be doing geometry in the sense of geometric properties. We would bring out shapes, have them trace them. Let's review grade 2, 3, and 4 about transformations. Do they know a reflection? Do they know a rotation? Do they know what a slide is, right? A translation. That's 2, 3, 4. They've already done that, but that's a quick review because we're going to grab that review and then we're going to just take them right into, well, now that I'm putting stuff on a grid, why don't I teach you quadrant 1 at the same time? Let's do quadrant 1. Let's learn how to plot points, X and Y. And now when I ask you to put the same shape back on the grid again, before I ask you to translate it, I'm going to actually ask you to write down the coordinates of my shape, whatever one I chose. And then you're going to translate it or reflect it or rotate it, and you're going to give me the new coordinates. So we are going to hit both geometry outcomes appropriate for grade 5 with coordinate geometry at the same time. So here's one of these ones. Coordinate geometry finishes pretty early on in the year. You're going to be done that. So these are ways, and this is something that we need to do with the grade 6s because they haven't done quadrant 1. So grade 5s and 6s will do that together. And then the 6s will learn Cartesian plane. They're going to go into all 4 quadrants. So This is how we kind of tie this year at a glance together. You see very early on algebra is there. We're not doing any algebra. There's no X's plus 2's or anything like that. Just review the order of operations. They do a lot of order of operations. In fact, by the time they get to grade 6, they're doing exponents. And we didn't do that in grade 7. So this is a step up for sure. So just start small, adding 2-digit numbers together, adding 2 numbers together, putting them in a bracket and adding them together. Put them in a bracket and multiply them by 2. Like, start small. Just go back through order of operations really small. And then we'll add more in as we get through the years. You see that it comes up here, all continues to go through. And then we're into December. So that's how you read this document. You see that I see lots of number, which it should be. I see some starts for geometry. I see some coordinate geometry. So I got the patterns of geometry happening here. Now I'm going to teach them how to find the coordinates, and I'm actually going to do something with the shapes. So that's that spiraling approach. We just keep going back and we leverage anything we can tie together at the same time. Let me grab the link for this one. And when you print this one out, you can just print it on regular 8.5 by 11 paper. Obviously, I would print it in color, and I would do it back to back, so you can just flip up the top one and there's the info from the introduction on the back side of it, and then you just kind of keep rolling it down that way. Then it makes it easier for you to see. Okay, let me grab this. Put that in the chat. And for those of you watching the video after the fact, all of these documents will be posted to the website, and I will show you where that is. So you can download them from there. All right, so that's your sample year at a glance. If this was interactive, what it would do is you will see another form of this same document. I'll just enlarge it a bit. And in the interactive one, anything that has possibly a need to be defined, like what is place value? What is symmetry? Like if I don't know how to explain those to students, I haven't done that before, or I'm new to this grade, you can click that on and a definition will come up for you, sometimes even exemplar, sometimes even a lesson plan. So those interactive ones are also on the website. They're both in numbered outcomes documents, and you'll find them in the year at a glance. Okay, so we've already kind of done this. So just to give you a sense for anybody who wants to do the planning alongside, we do 2 months at a time. We always do it ahead of schedule so that you are not in it and then planning for it. So we will be looking at things like this. We'll unpack each of the outcomes. We'll decide how much we can do based on our yellow highlights. What would that look like? What activities could I do with the students to gain the understanding that I need? Okay, so those are the kinds of things that we want to be able to do. You'll have apps in here. So when you get the slide deck, just click this one on, and you will have a money that you can use with the students. You can use it in your classroom if you don't have readily got money right away, but I would order some. Those will be important pieces, and I'll talk more about that when we get together of what I should order. Templates, if they don't know money, we've got templates made already. You don't have to make this stuff. It's already done. You just download what you need once you know the kids. So where do I find this? Here is a parent resource piece. You just click this one on, and all you have to do there is, if you want it, you don't have to use it. What we did is we looked at what does a grade 4, 5 to 6 student do in math, and how might I explain that to teacher or to parents? So we created a 1-pager for each grade, or maybe a 1.5 pages that you can use if you want to send it home to the parents at the beginning of the year. Here's what my kids are going to study this year in my grade, this type of thing. If you just want to use bits and pieces of it, or if you don't want to use it at all, that's fine, up to you. This is where you will find, this is the new website that's being created right now. So we're trying to shift everything to one location for the resources. But you will find these resources, the same ones that I have right now. You'll also find them on the Moving Forward curriculum website, but this one is going to be shut down on June 30th. Everything that's here will be dragged up into here. So it's kind of decide where you want to go. It doesn't really matter which one you go to. I'm going to just go to this one right now because I know that what we're looking for right now is already posted there, but you don't have to go here. If you're new to this site, there'll be a blue button here that just says sign up. You just use your login, your eSchool email, and sign up your own password, and then you have access to it. How do I find what I'm looking for? I just go into subjects. I go into math. And when I go into math down here, you'll find there'll be a box. So he hasn't got it posted yet, a box called grade 5. You'll also find it in the ARPDC, search by grade. And when I go into this, let's just look at the grade 4 one, you'll see it. So they had their session yesterday. So in their session, they have their recording. So you can go back in, get the recording, and here's a copy of the slide deck with any of the links in it that I had. So you will have the same thing for grade 5 in both sites. Okay, you'll find them there. And that's where we'll subsequently, when we meet again, we will always post those resources into the folder there so that you have access to it. So here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be planning for September and October. That starts next week. So it's again 3:45 to 5. And then we do November, December. Here are the dates. So by registering in this one, you're probably going to get a reminder already for those dates. But again, we'll record them, post them, and then you can use whatever's there. So I hope that that's been helpful to at least get you started to think about what grade 5 looks like. We'll follow a similar procedure tomorrow with grade 6 and go through that. I'll just stop the recording here. So if anybody has any questions.